Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's a brand new week, which means that it's time for the Front Runner Football Podcast, and that's what we're doing tonight with Jonty and Mazola Molefe joining me to unpack what's been happening over the last couple of days. We last spoke with the gents on Thursday last week, and by then there were still things that were kind of outstanding as far as discussions as to what the soccer bodies in South Africa are going to do about the impasse caused by Corona. And I guess we're not really any closer to getting a definite answer because that deadline was for tomorrow, but there might be a bit of illumination and clarity on the horizon. And maybe, Jonty, we'll start with you. Is there any sign that we know how or what will be said to CAF come tomorrow?
Well, I don't think anything's going to be said to CAF unless they've told them, well, we have... Because what I know is that the PSL are meeting on Thursday to discuss the way forward. So, unfortunately, CAF's May the 5th deadline is obviously before that. But I presume that perhaps someone from the PSL has told CAF that, well, we're meeting on Thursday, so we'll let you know after that. Sorry, we couldn't meet your May the 5th deadline. I mean, CAF set out that deadline, but I don't know how, there's nothing they can really do if a country doesn't adhere to it or has scheduled a meeting or is in its own lockdown, therefore can't get the right people in. And I think it's fair enough that they're basically going to decide on Thursday. I mean, it's interesting. I was speaking to someone over the weekend and did do a story for my paper, but someone from within the Exco, but they have compiled, this is what I'm told, their own very, very, very extensive report on how football can get back off the ground. It's a detailed report. It's and they're going to present that to the Minister of Sport and I think the Health Ministry, and they're hoping upon hope that they can get. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but their full intention, from my understanding of the PSL Exco, is to get the season finished. They don't want to stop the season and make it a points per game type situation that we're seeing in Europe. They want desperately to finish the season whenever that may be. And the problem is obviously with the government regulations at the moment, it's impossible. But they have put together a very detailed plan. And the impression I got also is that there's quite a lot of animosity within the PSL towards SAFA for the fact that they've been sort of putting out these reports saying, oh, you can't play unless it's level 1. They don't necessarily agree with that. And they feel like also SAFA's report was rather underwhelming and didn't really go into enough detail, whereas the report they say they've put together is a lot more detailed and has a lot more in it than what SAFA have produced.
Okay. And I mean, there's word that now the PSL are looking to meet with the health department. And I guess, Mazola, like Jonty says, that would be the ideal situation considering where the season kind of was cut off, to have the season played out to its finality. But failing which, I guess we're going to have to get creative. What are this points per game kind of concept? How do you feel about that one?
Yeah, look, I don't know if FIFA are saying you can carry on until, 31st of July, because that's what Ivan Koza was saying, speaking to the City Press and the Sunday Times. He kind of says, well, FIFA have given a directive to say you can go on until the 31st of July. And obviously that buys them even more time because the PSL's own timelines were around, the 30th of June. So now, FIFA have effectively given them a further month. I think the only major concern that they might have with that is the player contracts, the players whose contracts are expiring on the 30th of June, although that directive from FIFA also says, well, the contract can expand beyond that as until or whenever the season finishes. But a player can argue, look, in the case of George Maluleka, he can argue, he was reportedly meant to be getting a lot more at his new club, Mamelodi Sundowns, as of the 1st of July than he's currently getting at Kaizer Chiefs. So what if he argues, for argument's sake, he's lost half a bar in that month that his contract at Kaizer Chiefs was extended by another 4 weeks. But you're not going. The reality is that you're not going to have many of those, because especially free agents And if you're not moving to a Sundowns or maybe a Kaizer Chiefs from a lower division club or a smaller club, as it were, you are not probably making as much money as possibly George is going to make for his move from Chiefs to Sundowns. So I think with them still having that window of an extra 4 weeks that they had planned around, it definitely gives them the opportunity to finish the season. Because look, if they decide, which obviously as Jonty says, it's highly unlikely that they're going to go that route to declare the season null and void, because it opens them up. Like I think we've said this on this podcast before. It opens them up to a bunch of legal court battles. You know, right. I mean, Ajax Cape Town were willing to go to the Supreme Court for something as in this context as small as a Tendai Ndoro matter. Right. You know, imagine if it's about promotion and relegation. You know, moving from getting 500,000 rands a month of a PSL grant to 2.5 million. You know, that's a, you know, you will go to the Supreme Court to get that extra 2 million in your pocket. You know what I mean?
Of course.
And they've got the backing. Supposedly they've got the backing of Amsterdam as well, whose sole intention of being involved with the club as well is to see them in the top flight, you know, producing quality players to feed to their Ajax Amsterdam parent club. So, you know, and you know, vice versa with the top division teams. Black Leopards currently bottom of the log, and Amazulu can argue that, look, with 6-7 games left, we've made coaching changes. We could have potentially won our remaining games and at least been in the playoffs. You know, so you don't want to open yourselves up to those kind of disputes. So if you have a chance in the window to finish the season, I think they'll panic once it gets to mid-June, approaching July, and clubs are not training. You know, there's no sign of whether they can play football behind closed doors. They'll start panicking, because that means you eventually gonna eat into next season. If you stretch the season to August and September, then you are eating into the next season. Then you have to cram everything all up. We might have a situation where if we go back to normal, we don't have a Christmas recess anymore. You play during those 2-3 weeks of the festive season. You still have football, those type of things. So I think, definitely. I don't see a scenario where the PSL declare the season null and void up until maybe when it gets to mid-June, early July, and they still haven't kicked the ball.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of looking ahead to next season, do we foresee maybe a potential situation, Jonty, where we do away with maybe one of the cups, to kind of try and then fit in a lot of football should these delays carry on? Or is, obviously the sponsors and whatnot, is that too...
The problem with getting rid of one of the cups is that obviously the sponsors are invested in.
No, that's what I'm wondering, if any contracts are about to lapse anytime soon, where you can buy yourself a bit of wiggle room.
I don't think that's probably on the agenda from the league's point of view. They want to get as much revenue as possible, and they'll run as many competitions as possible.
But there's no ROI because everyone's kind of switched off a little bit. It's going to be, let me put it this way, it's going to be very hard to go sell the league after this whole thing is done.
Look, it's going to be tricky, but I don't think at the moment that's not the impression I get. My impression is they want to play. Obviously they are subject, like all of us, to what the government says we can and cannot do. I was speaking to Gavin Hunt the other week, and he said, he's quite happy at this stage, because there is a difficulty of, obviously, if you said the league starts tomorrow, players have been not playing. Okay, they may have been doing some stuff at home, training at home and vigorously, but it's still not much fitness. And we've talked about before. So Gavin Hunt said, well, he doesn't care. You must just, even if they're told they've got 3 weeks, they must just get ready in 3 weeks or 2 weeks. And he also said he doesn't mind if, if this season finishes on one weekend and next season starts on the following weekend. He said he's perfectly happy. That's fine.
He's not the one on the pitch.
You'll have to see how that goes, because basically what his argument, which makes some sense in that sense, was that, this is the pre-season, effectively. Well, this is the time off. So, let's just go.
Yeah, that's true.
Which may not make practical sense. But in terms of what they can do, it's very much dependent on the timeline. And, July 31st, as Mazola mentioned, if that's the date that FIFA have said, I don't see it happening by July 31st, not under the current regulations. So you'd almost have to look at later.
Be optimistic, Jonathan.
I'm trying, but I'm just trying to be optimistic by saying there's going to be any football at all this year. You have to look at later than that. I think maybe August, September, and then you truncate the season, but somehow you truncate it in a way that you don't reduce the amount of matches played, as in you don't reduce the competition. So you truncate the 2021 season, but you cram the fixtures in. And that means what that would probably mean.
Like Kev did with the Champions League.
What that would probably mean is stuff like, the sponsors have these weeks where they want as much mileage as possible, where you have to say to them, well, we're going to play league games for teams that aren't in these competitions this week.
Right.
Even if you start the MTN8 and, you could work it. You start the MTN8, which is only for the sides that finished in the top 8 from the previous season.
No, there are definitely enough weeks. There are definitely enough weeks in the season to cram it. It's just like Jonty, I think he makes a great point about where the sponsors want all the mileage to themselves. Because when you've got cup games, you don't have midweek games at all. And you have one game on a Sunday or one game on a Saturday. Right. But they could say, look, desperate times calls for desperate situations. We're going to play midweek games on Tuesday and Wednesday and Fridays. And even on Saturdays, we can have a cup game at 3 p.m., but later at night, we'll have a league game, For
sure. I mean, there's something that Farouk Khan actually once brought up, is that they actually should just do that. Have midweek games be cup, and at the weekend, we play normal football. You know what I mean? That way, things would just go...
I mean, I found this season, there's been weeks where... this season, there's been weeks when you've been sitting there going, why are there no games?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
They've definitely got the space. I mean, and I don't know if it's a case of then you have to go, because obviously there's the situation with the club competitions, whether you go, I don't know what you do. I don't know if you go, if you negotiate with CAF to not play in them simply because, because that's an option. I don't know. You have to explore all the options. I don't know. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying you've got to look at how you can. First, you've got to look at how you can fit everything in.
Right.
And if you can't, you've got to look at what you leave out. But I think in terms of the PSL and revenue, what they would probably encourage clubs to leave out is their continental commitments, to be honest.
That's interesting. Okay, that's like literally throwing a cat among the pigeons. Mazet, in terms of speaking to Gavin Hunt on Zoom, what was some of the stuff that came out as far as what he's thinking, where he's at? I mean, Jonty's already touched on it in terms of how he sees some of the stuff happening as far as this is preseason already, then going into finishing the season, and then carrying on with the new season. Anything else that he kind of shared with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, he shared a lot, Gavin. Gavin, especially, you find him in a good mood. You get stories for days.
Right.
I think one of the things, his stance on finishing the season hasn't changed. As Jonty was saying earlier, he still maintains that you've got to finish the season. You've got to earn the trophy. You can't just, you can't just, give it to whoever's top of the log and relegate the bottom two or whatever. You have to play to earn it. And then also we asked him a bunch of questions. I mean, obviously, he's been linked to Kaizer Chiefs. We know that long before even Pitso went to Sundowns, while Gavin was at SuperSport United. While he was at SuperSport United, he met with Patrice Motsepe over the possibility of being Sundowns head coach. So he was kind of touching on that. And I found it interesting that he didn't really dismiss any future moves to any of the big three. He just talks about it being a timing factor. He makes a good point. I've never actually thought about it that way. That a lot of the coaches that have found themselves in the hot seat of either Pirates, Chiefs, and Sundowns at the time that they were appointed, I think, with the exception maybe of Steve Kompela, who, when he got the Chiefs job, he had to be bought out of his contract at Maritzburg United to take over at Kaizer Chiefs. But a lot of them are usually unattached when they take those jobs. I mean, Pitso, when he took over at Mamelodi Sundowns 7 years ago, he had been unattached for some time after leaving the Bafana job. Ernst Middendorp at the moment head coach of Kaizer Chiefs, when he took over replacing Solinas, he had been in Bangkok, but I don't think Chiefs had to buy him out of that contract over there where he was technical director. And at the same time, Joseph Zenbauer, one of the criticisms was that he had not held a job for some time before he actually got the Pirates job, and the list goes on. Your Stuart Baxter's in the past, even the late Ted Dumitru. He makes a good point that it's all about the timing. If for instance, if Gavin were to be unattached after his spell at Wits, I have no doubt in my mind that a lot of the clubs, if they are looking for a coach at the time, would come running. The same could happen with Pizzo. If Pizzo is unattached by come 30th of June, 1st of July, and maybe Chiefs are looking for a coach, or Wits are looking for a coach, or whoever, or even some of the North African clubs that he's been linked with, you just never know. So I think it was an entertaining sort of video conference, press conference with Gavin Hunt, and for me, those are some of the things that stood out. And of course, he said a lot. I think it was close to an hour of just Gavin. Usually after a post-match press conference, he gives you those one-liners depending on what mood he's in. But but this morning, you just ask one question and he just throws you with gems all around.
Okay, Veli, your impressions of the Zoom conference?
Yeah, no, I think Mazola has captured almost everything that happened this morning. And I think for me was also to hear more about how the coaches are handling this current situation that we're in now, and also if we were to come back, because this one is proving to be another tricky point as well, to say yes, you can continue to play, but how do you address these issues of social distancing at training? And if you are addressing all these things of social distancing at training, this is football, a contact sport. When it comes to play, how do you also try and work around these things? But I think one point which got me really interested was when he mentioned that he was recently approached and spoke to one big club chairman, and he was asked on what are his terms, or how is he looking at when it comes to this particular job. And he said, Chairman, on my own terms, and this is how I would like to have total control. They never came back to you.
Okay.
So I found that part to be very interesting, because and also we asked him also about maybe coaching outside the country, and he did say that there were some approaches from Zambia. There had been some approaches in Ghana, because there's this sore point when it comes to Gavin and Bafana Bafana. I don't know how many interviews he's been to for that coaching job at Bafana Bafana, and today he also opened up about that one. So, and also we asked him about a typical Gavin Hunt player, because there are players that you would see moving from other clubs to Bidvest Wits, and you would think that, look, these are just average players, but when they get to Wits, if you look at
like
the
who?
squad
Kyle Luck.
Season, and you compare
like Kyle Luck.
I'm not sure. I don't think that was his signing. I'm not sure.
That was definitely Gavin's signing.
Total control.
He thought he could turn him into a Benny McCarthy, and it didn't quite work out.
Yeah, but look, if you compare the squad he's got this season and to the team that he had when he won the league, I think back in 2017, this team has got no right to be challenging for a league title, but they're still up there.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's interesting that he agreed with that. Velile asked him that question. He said, when you compare the two squads, your current squad has got no right to even be title challengers. And he admitted that, I had a proper squad in 2017 when I won the league title. You know, I think at the time the squad was very balanced, but at the moment, you know, they didn't do so well in the free market this time around.
Right.
Yeah, but so this also tells you more about the coach Gavin, and also he did say that it's a point that is raised before that on the reasons which led to them selling Gabadinho Mango at the beginning of the season, it was due to the financial challenges at the club. But he said if Gabadinho Mango was still there, they would probably would have won the league by now, or sitting at the top. You know, so I think he was very honest in today's virtual presser.
Okay. Let's touch on this fiasco that still carries on in the background with SAFA. What's the latest now with Gay Mokoena? It seems like the rumblings from within want him now to be put on the back burner and somewhat punished for coming out and being essentially honest with us. What's the latest?
Well, how long have we been in football? Well, I've been in football for 20 years. The general message is that if you cross Danny Jordan, you don't last massively long. In your position, and the latest document I've seen is by close of business today, the NEC have been asked to vote on whether to place Gay Mokoena on suspension, or a precautionary suspension is what the document says. So it looks like, and if my reading of the NEC is, they tend to go the way that the president of SAFA wants them to go, and then so Mr. Mokoena will be placed on precautionary suspension. I don't, the ins and outs it's very difficult, but I do think that SAFA at the moment, I don't know, it's not a healthy organization. It's got huge amounts of financial problems. It's jumping in. I mean, Velile mentioned on Thursday, I think, and I picked up on this as well. They jump in and they make statements about whether the South African football, whether the PSL can go ahead. They try and, a void was left by the PSL and the fact that they weren't really commenting. But, maybe they were going ahead and putting together this extensive report that I was told that they have put together now, and they are meeting on Thursday. And I think SAFA are sort of, I don't know, it feels to me like they are stepping on toes. They are annoying people left, right, and centre. And there's more to it than just, than just firing your vice president. I don't think, that's just, one squabble. There seem to be too many. As a national association, they seem to be having too many fights with too many people. I know that from my impression, the PSL are pretty peeved with them for that sort of doctor's report they put out. And it seems like, I was even told by someone who didn't want to be named that, it's kind of like a situation where PSL, I think, feel like SAFA are trying to stop the season from going ahead at the moment. That's how the league feel. They feel like the National Association are literally doing their utmost to stop football from happening. And that can't be a healthy, I don't know. They're sort of saying that.
Is that a correct reading, Jens? Would you see that, Mazola and Veli, based on what Jonty is saying, is that a good enough reading of the current situation?
Yeah, I think so. I think even from the beginning, when, even prior lockdown, when I think the last press conference we had at SAFA House, and I even asked whether they would give the PSL referees or not. It was clear from that time on that the intention was to it looked like the intention was to stop football from happening. It's SAFA. I think SAFA, have a press release almost every week about why football should not continue. Every time the president has addressed the nation, SAFA have released a statement, to say, following what the president said last night, we therefore think, and we have our two doctors or experts telling us football should not continue under any circumstance. When it was announced that the lockdown restrictions were moved to level 4, immediately the next morning, SAFA had a statement saying football should be played at lockdown level 1. So it almost seems or feels like from the onset, even when sports minister Natim Tetwa, spoke at a, Velile was at that briefing where he said it's okay. Even before lockdown, he said, we think football can continue behind closed doors as government. And then he immediately, almost the next day, he called a press conference to kind of bash what the minister had told journalists, even though he himself was at that very same briefing. So he had spoken to the media, after that briefing, telling them that he does not agree with what the minister had just said, and then called his very own press conference the next day to kind of reiterate that, repeat the same thing. Right. And ever since then, it's been one statement after another, after whether it's the president that's speaking or whether it's the cluster ministers that give a media briefing on how to, what the regulations, look like or what they mean for South Africans. SAFA have not missed an opportunity.
Okay, Stavich?
Yeah, for me, I also see this as just part of power battles, and if you've been following our game for a very long time, especially if you go back to the period 2009 till now, this is not something new, but which is very unfortunate because we're dealing with something very delicate at this stage and very serious, and not just for football only, but for the economy of the country. And professional football features prominently there. Look, especially on the points that Mazola has raised, because for me, as someone who was there, that's where the whole thing started, especially around this COVID-19, that the ministry had made a statement through the minister, and the FA disagreed, especially on this thing of behind closed doors. And I remember the following day at 9:30 a.m., the president of SAFA was expected, in fact, had an appointment to meet the chairman of the league. And that meeting didn't happen due to some of these events which we're talking about now, which I find to be very unfortunate, because I feel that if the two bodies had met before, this thing would have been easier. But I also feel that, and I said this last week, like Jonty was saying, that the FA cannot release a statement talking about professional football and citing all these other countries in Europe and talking about professional football in this country without even having mentioning the local professional football,
right,
in sentence there in that statement. But also going back to the issue of the former acting CEO, I find this precautionary suspension, the imminent suspension of Gay Mokoena, to be very confusing, because the report, it came in his capacity as the former acting CEO, and now you're suspending him as the vice president, which I find to be odd.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, those are two different positions, but also now it also tells you about the power. Hence, I'm saying it's the power battles. So it's people just exercising their power, and I think we should also remind people that the final arbiter on whether football should continue, the FIFA working group, FIFA in their COVID-19 working group, they made that clear that government has the final say. It's not FIFA, it's not CAF, it's not the FA, it's government.
Sure. Okay, we're going to leave it on that note. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Veli, thank you for joining us. And Jonty and Mazola from the beginning. We'll do this again on Thursday. We're out of time as far as our Zoom discussions are concerned. Until then, gents, have a good one. And to you two listening, thank you very much for tuning into the Front Runner Football Podcast. We'll meet again in a few days' time.